Sarah had always loved the quiet of the countryside. The air was fresh, the sky wide and blue, and the scent of the farm fields surrounded her at every turn. She had spent her entire life on this farm, surrounded by golden crops and animals, with the routine of farm work grounding her every day. Yet, as much as she loved the land, Sarah couldn't ignore a deeper feeling inside of her, a feeling that something was missing. She was raised to believe that family was everything, that hard work meant success, and that her duty to the farm was paramount. It was a life of stability, one that many people would envy, but deep down, Sarah felt trapped. The older she got, the more she wondered if there was something more waiting for her beyond the fence lines. In the quiet of the rural town she had always called home, her life changed when she met Michael. He wasn't from the farm, nor was he like anyone she had known before. He came from a nearby town, a little more sophisticated, and had a confidence that was immediately noticeable. He knew how to speak, how to listen, and he paid attention to Sarah in a way that made her feel special. He was charming, funny, and seemed to understand her better than anyone. He made her laugh, made her feel alive in ways she hadn't imagined before. For Sarah, it felt like a dream. Michael was the kind of person who seemed to glide through life without ever being weighed down by anything. He was successful, had friends everywhere, and lived in a world that felt so different from her own. When they first began seeing each other, it felt like the perfect escape from her daily routine. He would take her to town fairs, out to dinners, and even on short weekend trips to places she had never been. Michael showed her a life beyond the farm, and it was exciting. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like she was living, not just going through the motions. In the beginning, everything seemed perfect. Michael was attentive and kind, and Sarah found herself falling for him quickly. She loved his energy, his charm, and how easy he made everything seem. He was always there when she needed him, offering a hand when the farm work got too overwhelming, and listening to her when she spoke about her dreams. It wasn't long before Sarah introduced him to her family, and Michael charmed them too. Her parents liked him right away, impressed by his manners and the way he treated Sarah. It felt like everything was falling into place. But soon, little things started to change. Michael began to be more possessive of Sarah's time. At first, it seemed harmless. He would want to know where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing. When she'd go out with friends or spend time on the farm, Michael would ask a lot of questions. It was subtle at first, just enough to make Sarah wonder if she was doing something wrong. She brushed it off, thinking it was just his way of caring. But the questions became more frequent, the tone more insistent. One evening, after a long day working in the barn, Sarah met Michael outside. He was waiting for her, his arms crossed, a frown on his face. "Where were you today?" he asked, his voice sharp. Sarah felt a flicker of discomfort, but she explained she had spent the afternoon with a friend, working on a project. Michael's frown deepened, and he didn't speak for a long moment. Then, quietly, he asked, "Who else was there?" It was as though his words were wrapped in a weight she couldn't escape. Sarah tried to explain it was just her and her friend, that there was nothing more to it. But Michael's expression didn't change. He seemed distant, like something was bothering him, but Sarah didn't understand what. She tried to brush it off, but his stare lingered, unsettling her. Over the next few weeks, Michael's behavior became more possessive. He would call Sarah repeatedly, checking in on her when she wasn't with him. He began showing up unexpectedly at the farm, and sometimes, even though she was busy, he would insist on seeing her. There were moments when he seemed genuinely concerned, but other times, his need to be close to her felt more controlling than caring. The turning point came one afternoon when they were working together in the barn. Michael had come by to help her with some repairs on the fence, and though they had worked together on the farm many times before, this time it felt different. Michael was more intense, more focused on her than the task at hand. He would watch her closely, his eyes following every movement she made. Sarah could feel the tension in the air, a quiet pressure that hung between them. She wasn't sure what had changed, but something in Michael's demeanor made her uncomfortable. His usual smile had vanished, replaced by a coldness that she couldn't ignore. As they worked, he grew more frustrated, snapping at her when she made small mistakes or took too long to finish a task. Sarah tried to keep the peace, but she could sense something was wrong. She could feel the shift, and it terrified her. This wasn't the man she had fallen in love with. Then, one evening, as Sarah was finishing up in the barn, she asked him, "Michael, what's going on? You've been acting different lately." The question, simple and to the point, seemed to catch him off guard. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Instead, he turned away, staring out over the farm as though he were looking for something. "Nothing's going on," he finally said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I'm just trying to keep things together." But Sarah didn't buy it. She could see the strain in his face, the way his jaw clenched when he spoke. She didn't know what it was, but she felt that something dark was lurking under the surface. As Sarah tried to piece together the man she thought she knew, she began to realize just how much control Michael was trying to gain. At first, it had been small things wanting to pick her up when she didn't need it, insisting on accompanying her to places she usually went alone. But now, it was more than just actions. Michael's need to be in control of her life, to be in control of every aspect of their relationship, was starting to show. There was a sense of powerlessness creeping into Sarah's mind. She didn't know how she had ended up here, how she had allowed someone to take hold of her life so completely. She began to question herself, wondering if she had been too trusting, too naive. One evening, as the sky turned dark and the stars began to twinkle above the farm, Sarah asked herself a question she hadn't dared ask before. What if I don't want this anymore? What if I can't keep pretending that everything is fine? But as the question echoed in her mind, Sarah also knew that leaving Michael wouldn't be as simple as just walking away. There were deep feelings involved, family expectations, and a future she had imagined with him. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The weight of Michael's presence, his need to control her every move, was beginning to feel unbearable. And though she didn't have all the answers, she knew that something had to change before it was too late. The days after that unsettling evening in the barn were filled with a heavy silence. Sarah's mind was a whirlwind of emotions: confusion, fear, and an undeniable sense of urgency. She spent hours reflecting on everything that had happened between her and Michael. The man she had fallen for, the man she had trusted, was no longer the same. The warmth she had once felt around him now felt cold and suffocating. Though Sarah loved the farm, she couldn't ignore the growing sense of being trapped. It was as though the walls around her were closing in, and she couldn't breathe. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how much control Michael had over her life. Every step she took, every decision she made, seemed to be dictated by his presence. She couldn't even remember the last time she had done something for herself without feeling his watchful eyes on her. Her friends noticed the change in her, too. Sarah had always been the one to encourage her friends, to share her dreams and plans. But recently, she had pulled away from them. She avoided phone calls, skipped out on social gatherings, and made excuses when they invited her to do something. It wasn't that she didn't want to see them. It was just that she didn't have the energy. Every moment felt like a battle, as though she was constantly trying to keep up with Michael's demands. As the days passed, Sarah began to take small steps toward change. She knew she couldn't stay in this situation much longer. But the thought of leaving Michael was terrifying. He had a way of making her feel like there was no way out, no place for her to go. Still, she couldn't ignore the quiet voice inside her that kept urging her to find a way out. It wasn't just about the farm or about Michael, it was about her own future, her own happiness. One afternoon, Sarah visited a friend she hadn't seen in a while. Emily was someone Sarah had known since childhood, a kind soul who had always listened without judgment. When Emily opened the door and saw Sarah standing there, her face lit up with a mix of surprise and concern. "Sarah, I've missed you," Emily said, pulling her into a warm hug. "What's going on with you? You've been so distant lately." Sarah hesitated. She had so many things to say, but the words felt stuck in her throat. She hadn't realized just how much she had pulled away from her friends until that moment. Sitting down at the kitchen table, she finally opened up. telling Emily everything she had been feeling about Michael's changing behavior. The way he made her feel small, the suffocating weight of his presence. Emily listened patiently, her expression growing more concerned with each word. When Sarah finished, Emily spoke softly. "Sarah, you're not alone in this. You can't let him control your life. You're stronger than this, and I know you can find a way out." Those words were like a spark in the dark. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Emily didn't just listen, she believed in Sarah, and that belief felt like a lifeline. It was a reminder that there were people who cared about her, people who didn't want to see her trapped in a situation that wasn't healthy for her. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her room, her mind racing. She couldn't keep going like this. She couldn't stay with Michael, pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. But how could she leave him? He had been a part of her life for so long. How could she simply walk away from everything? The more Sarah thought about it, the more she realized that the real problem wasn't just Michael's behavior, it was the fact that she had allowed it to go on for so long. She had been so focused on keeping the peace, on maintaining the life she thought she wanted, that she had ignored the warning signs. She had let herself believe that things would get better, that Michael would change. But deep down, she knew that wasn't going to happen. Sarah took a deep breath. She needed to make a plan. She couldn't just leave without thinking things through. She needed to be smart about it. She began to save money, little by little, setting aside whatever she could without Michael noticing. She knew it wasn't enough to escape in one night, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, Sarah became more secretive. She began to spend more time away from Michael, using the excuse of farm work or errands to give herself space. Each day, she felt a little more like herself again, even if the fear of being caught lingered in the back of her mind. But she couldn't go on living in constant fear. She had to find a way out. Then, one night, as Sarah was cleaning up after dinner, she felt Michael's eyes on her. She turned around, and there he was, standing in the doorway, watching her. It was the same look he had given her in the barn, intense, almost possessive. She froze for a moment, unsure of what to say. "Where are you going tomorrow?" he asked, his tone more serious than usual. "I'm just going into town," Sarah replied, trying to sound casual. Michael didn't move. He just stared at her, as though waiting for something more. Sarah's heart began to race. She could feel his suspicion growing, but she had no choice but to continue with the lie. "I'll be back before dark," she added, trying to keep her voice steady. Michael nodded, but there was something in his eyes that made Sarah uneasy. She didn't know if he believed her or if he was just biding his time, waiting for something. The next morning, Sarah woke early, her heart pounding in her chest. Today was the day. She had made all the preparation she could. She had packed a small bag, gathered the money she had saved, and written a note to her parents, explaining everything. It wasn't going to be easy, but Sarah knew it was the only way to regain her life. As she stood at the door, ready to leave, she heard Michael's voice behind her. "Where are you going?" His words were soft, but there was an edge to them, something that made Sarah's stomach tighten. She didn't turn around. She couldn't. If she did, she might lose her nerve. "I'm leaving," she said quietly, her voice steady but full of determination. For a moment, there was silence. Then, she heard him take a step forward. "You can't leave," he said, his voice almost pleading. But Sarah didn't stop. She didn't turn around. She walked out the door, leaving Michael and the life she had once known behind. Sarah didn't know what the future held, but as she walked away from the farm and toward the unknown, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. The weight of Michael's presence no longer pressed down on her. The world was open, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah knew that she had the power to shape her own life. She didn't have all the answers, and the road ahead would be difficult, but she had taken the first step. She had broken free.